Hello everybody and welcome back to Dollar Tree Dinners. Today we're going to be trying some new recipes, but not just any new recipes. We're going to be trying some poor man's recipes. Poor man's recipes are supposed to be kind of affordable versions of more expensive foods, and this was inspired by these smoked oysters that I found at Dollar Tree. I asked for suggestions on how to use these, and I had a lot of people tell me that I should try the poor man's oyster Rockefeller. So I was like, why not stop there? So we're gonna try the poor man's lobster. We're gonna do poor man's sushi. I think it sounds like a really fun idea and I'm really excited. I'm going to be using as many Dollar Tree ingredients as I can, but not everything I'm gonna be showing today came from Dollar Tree. I will kind of walk you through it as I go, but the oyster Rockefeller will be entirely from Dollar Tree. So let's go ahead and get started with that first. I've seen a few different versions of this poor man's oyster Rockefeller, and the version that I'm going to be trying is essentially this one, although I might be like doctoring it up just a little bit. But we're going to start with the oysters. Now, Dollar Tree does sell smoked oysters in oil. I just showed you these two pouches that I got from Dollar Tree, but I did also notice that they have the canned ones as well. So I have both. We're going to try both of them and see how they compare. But the recipe that I'm going to be doing will be the same for both of them. Let's start with the tinned oysters. So these are 3 ounces per container. It says drain weight 2.29 ounces. The pouch just says net weight 3.53 ounces. And let's open those up. Now, I do need to let you guys know that I have never had oyster Rockefeller at all. Seeing as I've never had oyster Rockefeller, and this will be my first time trying it, but I am also trying a poor man's version and a Dollar Tree version. There is a lot of variables going on there. So the first thing we're supposed to do is kind of drain off the excess liquid or oil. And I do think I'm going to go ahead and just remove this chili pepper that's in the center here. The next thing it says is to top it with some Creole seasoning. I have been able to buy Tony's at Dollar Tree. I also buy this Kingsford Cajun seasoning at Dollar Tree. Cajun and Creole is not exactly the same, but I tend to not gravitate towards this Tony's because it's really salty. I think that's what she actually used in the video. I'm going to use this Kingsford Cajun. We're dealing with tinned fish, so I'm trying not to add a bunch of extra salt to it. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit of each. I like to Frankenstein recipes together, as you guys know, so I'm not going to add the butter right now. I have an idea that I think will make this really good. Next, we're going to go on with some Louisiana hot sauce. Again, couple different variations at Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using this one today. There's no real measurements here. Gonna drizzle some of that on top. Next with some lemon juice. I just have the kind in a bottle. Again, couple of variations here. You can also use these true lemon packets. These are just crystallized lemon. Add a little bit of water to it and boom, lemon juice. Just a couple little splashes on top. The next thing she added was some minced garlic. I'd say that this was optional, but I've seen a lot of different variations of this and they almost all seem to include some kind of a minced garlic. You can also use fresh garlic if that's what you have. And then of course, here's where I'm gonna deviate from the recipe that I'm referencing, because what I wanna do is make a topping for this. So into a bowl, I'm gonna add a couple of spoonfuls of the panko breadcrumbs and also some Parmesan cheese, probably about an equal amount of Parmesan to panko. If you wanted to add some greenery to this, you could definitely do some chopped parsley in there as well. I'm realizing that I probably didn't necessarily have to do this in a bowl, but what's done is done. And I'm going to distribute that over top of my oysters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the margarine on top of that so that the breadcrumbs will get nice and brown when you can do them in the oven or you can do them in the air fryer. I'm going to probably do them in my toaster oven. There's kind of no specific instructions with this that I found. What I'm going to do is I'm going to toss them in my toaster oven. I think I'm probably going to do 400 degrees for like 10 minutes or so and see how they look after that. While those are baking, I can get started on the pouch version, which I am going to need a baking tray for that since I don't have the tins to cook them in. Fun times. All right, so let's drain off the liquid from these. And then I'm going to transfer those into a baking dish. If you have something a little bit smaller than this, because this is quite empty, I'm going to try to keep everything kind of in the center there. Well, those smell quite smoky. These actually smell more smoky than the ones in the tin did. I just realized that I forgot to add some of the minced garlic to this one, so hopefully it's not going to be too late to just kind of, not ideal to sprinkle it on top, but that's what we're going to have to do. So the tins I ended up doing in the toaster oven at 400 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes, like I said, but then I finished them off in the air fryer because it was taking a really long time for them to get brown on top. Let me give you a nice close-up shot there of, I put them on a little trivet for my countertop because they're pretty hot. Now apparently these are supposed to be eaten with crackers, so I do have some saltine crackers that I got from Dollar Tree. This is kind of like that moment of truth. Let's see. I think those look pretty good. Now again, these had other things in them like onions and chili peppers. It wasn't just oysters. Onion, carrots, chili. Let's grab a little bit of everything. And that is our little cracker there with some oyster and some topping. And now it's time to give it a taste. There are a lot of reasons for me to kind of be nervous about this, but I've never had oyster Rockefeller before. I don't have a basis for comparison. You can take my opinion as you will. Let's try it. You know, I don't know what I quite expected, but I actually think it's pretty good. It's not my favorite thing in the world. It does have a slight smoky flavor. It has a little bit of heat from that hot sauce and the Cajun seasoning. I think I really like the Parmesan panko topping. I feel like it's missing a creamy element though. I feel like if I were to make this again, some like cream cheese added into it would be really good because it just needs a little like something creamy. I don't know. I just feel like it's missing that. But we have the other one to try as well. Now, presentation wise, I have to say that the tins look really beautiful. They were very easy to get all of the ingredients kind of evenly distributed amongst them. This one doesn't look nearly as pretty. I did just do this one in my toaster oven because I don't think I can fit this in my air fryer. So not having the tins is a bit of a challenge as far as making this goes because you have to find something you can bake it in. I could have probably waited until those tins were empty and then potentially reuse them, I suppose. But this one just doesn't look as nice as the other one does. That isn't to say that it's not going to taste better. Who knows? I'll try them and compare them. But I prefer the presentation of the tins. Oyster Rockefeller, poor man's Oyster Rockefeller, batch number 2. Ooh, the flavor on that one is way more intense. I'm not even sure if I like these at all. I tried to kind of do an equal distribution of everything, but these are just way more smoky. So the smoke flavor overpowers the other flavors that we added, the Cajun seasoning, the hot sauce, the garlic, all of that is kind of lost to the smoky flavor of the ones in the pouches. One more bite and just see. Gone back and forth with them a little bit, trying and comparing and tasting, and I do have to say that the ones in the tins are a lot better than the ones in the pouch. I'm sure that the ones in the pouch would be better by themselves or like in a dip or something like that because they have that really intense smoky flavor, but in this specific application, the ones in the pouch just kind of lack any layers or depth, whereas the ones in the tins, they still have that slight smoky flavor, but I can taste all of the other elements that I added to it. I still think though that it's lacking a creamy element, but I think this is good. I think it's a really great base recipe. I think if you wanted to add just a little something to it, add some cream cheese to it, but otherwise I would definitely recommend this if you're a fan of oysters and you're a fan of kind of Cajun, Louisiana style cooking. The next thing that we're gonna be trying is poor man's lobster. Now this is kind of a funny one because lobster originally started off as a poor man's meal, and then over time it just became more and more expensive. But there are variations of lobster, which is essentially where you take cod fillets and you cook them in sugar and salted water to give them more of a sweet lobster flavor. Cod fillets are around $15 for 2 pounds of fillets, which is around 8 fillets, whereas a lobster tail is anywhere from $6 to $7 a piece. So it is a lot cheaper, but I thought maybe we could take it a step further. I'm gonna make the poor man's lobster, but I'm also gonna see if we can take that and turn it into a lobster roll. So we have a pot of water, and to this we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of salt. I'm using sea salt, and a 1/2 cup of sugar. And then we're gonna let that come up to a boil. Now this recipe that I'm using is the first one that comes up when you type poor man's lobster. It's from the Reckoning podcast. And then we're gonna drop in some cod fillets. Now I buy them frozen. I thawed them in my fridge. So I have 3 cod fillets. And then you're supposed to just drop those in there, and when they're done, they will float to the top. Well, mine are already kind of floating. Oh, they're kind of sinking. They're bouncing back and forth. It does say to boil it for 10 minutes, but my fillets are kind of small, so I feel like that's a little long. So I debated letting this boil for the full 10 minutes because that's what everybody says to do, but I read a lot of reviews from other people who say that 10 minutes is too long, and so I'm gonna stick with the 4 that I feel like this needs, which it's been 4 minutes. So I'm gonna take it out. And now I have some melted butter that I'm gonna pour over top of it. And this is butter. You can probably use margarine, but I am using butter to replicate that lobster flavor. There were a lot of suggestions to put some lemon juice with it too. Optional, but I have some Red Lobster seafood seasoning. This I used to buy at Dollar Tree. I haven't seen it there in a long time, but I am gonna sprinkle a little bit of that as well. It's kind of like a cheaper version of Old Bay. I sound a little uncultured when I say I've never tried some of these things, but I don't go out to eat very often, number 1. Number 2, I've never been a very big fan of seafood in general. When I was a kid, we would go to a seafood restaurant. I loved crab and crab legs. I loved like popcorn shrimp and fried clam strips, but that was the extent of my love of seafood. I never really liked lobster, and that's kind of continued into adulthood a bit. I'm curious to see how this is gonna taste. Of course, I have had lobster in my lifetime. I've always preferred crab legs to lobster, specifically snow crab legs. But I am curious to see how this is gonna turn out. I'm curious to know how much it changes the cod, kind of boiling it in that sugar and salt water. I don't know if I would say it tastes like lobster, but it also doesn't taste like cod. I'm trying not to eat too much of this because I want to make a lobster roll out of it. It tastes like popcorn. It tastes like popcorn. That's weird to say. It's quite tender, very flaky. It has a lightly firmer texture than cod would typically have. It tastes very buttery because of the butter that we added to the end, which makes it kind of taste like popcorn. It's not quite lobster, but it's not lobster. So it's meant to just kind of like simulate lobster in a sense, that kind of same texture, the kind of sweetness. Let's make it into a lobster roll and see how that turns out. I'm gonna go for kind of like the buttery style lobster roll. So I'm just gonna go ahead and shred up the fish straight in the lobster here, kind of trying to keep some chunks. We need to butter and toast some buns, so I'm just gonna use hot dog buns because again, this is poor man's lobster, so we're not gonna do potato rolls or brioche bread. We're just gonna do plain old generic hot dog buns from the Dollar General. Well, let's go down with some butter on our skillet. And then I'm gonna fillet open the hot dog bun and let that soak up the melted butter. Got a nicely buttered and browned roll. And now we're gonna go over that with our cod. I think I am gonna add a little bit of chives for some greenery to it. And maybe just a splash more lemon to brighten it up a bit. It's quite buttery. And that is our poor man's lobster transformed into a poor man's lobster roll. Let's give it a try. Now this was kind of my idea. If you look up poor man's lobster rolls, you will get some results. They are mostly using imitation crab, which we'll get into that as we get into the sushi. But I was thinking to myself, well, if there's a variation of a poor man's lobster, why aren't they using that to make lobster rolls? Because if you're making it with imitation crab, that's a crab roll. But I'm curious to see how this turned out. So the hot dog bun is a little on the flimsy side, not the best vessel. Let's try it. I can definitely say that this was better just as the fish than it was as a lobster roll. I feel like the flavors are just very subtle. And when it's paired with buttered toasted bread, that's all I can really taste is the buttered toasted bread. Not that that's bad in any sort of way. It feels more defined when you just eat it as the fish. But once it's on a roll, it just kind of gets lost in the sauce. That isn't to say that it's not good, or I don't recommend at least trying it. If you are in the mood for a lobster roll and you've got some cod fillets in your freezer, it could be a good substitute. I wouldn't expect it to pack too strong of like a lobster flavor. I almost feel like the water potentially needed more sugar. I've seen some other variations of this where they put like up to a cup of sugar in the water, and I think it's just not quite sweet enough to pass as lobster. Again, I've never been much of a seafood person. That's why you don't see me talking about fish very often on my channel. Although it is a more affordable meal for a lot of people, it's just not something I grew up eating. It's not something I really learned how to cook. There's one exception to that, which is sushi, and that brings me into the third meal. I love sushi. I make a lot of different variations of kind of sushi bowls at home. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of explore some of that and talk about some affordable ways that you can have sushi. Now, there is a poor man's sushi. We are going to be trying that today, and it involves canned tuna. I have a can of albacore tuna here. Canned tuna tends to have a very strong flavor, so we're going to try it. But I think that imitation crab is potentially going to be a little bit better. Personally, I really like crab rolls. I like spicy tuna rolls. I like crab rolls. But I tend to gravitate more towards sushi with crab in it. You can also use canned salmon, but let's make some poor man's sushi. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be making two versions of this sushi. The first is going to be made with imitation crab. I have flake style. This is around $2 at the grocery store, at least for me. It was like $2 and some change. So this is a really affordable option. Dollar Tree sells tuna. Now, if you're going to be paying $1.25 for tuna, you might as well get something like albacore tuna, which is also a little bit better for this because it has a milder flavor. Tuna is very distinct and it's hard to mask with other flavors, like even when you're adding things like sriracha to it. So I do recommend, if you're doing it at Dollar Tree, it's $1.25. Regardless of what kind of tuna you get, you might as well get the better quality stuff. Sriracha and mayo you can get just about anywhere. I have Kikkoman sriracha and Hellmann's mayo. You can use any version of this. I've done a Dollar Tree specific version of this before with Dollar Tree mayonnaise and Dollar Tree sriracha. I'm very much a use what you got kind of person, so I don't buy specialty mayonnaise like Kewpie mayo. I just use the regular mayo, and I always keep sriracha on hand. We are also going to need to cook some rice. Now this is my rice cooker. I have 2 cups of white rice that I rinsed about 3 or 4 times, and then 2 cups of water. I'm just using regular plain long grain white rice, the cheap stuff from the grocery store, and I'm just going to let that cook on white rice, and that's going to take 25 to 30 minutes or so. In the meantime, let's mix up a batch of spicy mayo. Again, just any mayonnaise that you have will work for this. I tend to do about equal parts, so like 1 part mayonnaise, 1 part sriracha. So that's probably like a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3. And we'll do about the same in sriracha. If you like it less spicy, you can cut this back. Some other ways that you can make this taste a little bit more like Japanese mayo would be to add a little bit of sugar to it to give the mayonnaise a richer flavor, but I tend to just use the plain regular old mayonnaise. Once that's all mixed up, taste it, make sure you're happy with it, adjust. I'm gonna leave it and I'm just gonna stick that in the fridge. So my rice is just about done. So I'm gonna go ahead and work on the protein element of the sushi. So first we have the albacore tuna, which right off the bat I had a bone in that one. That's interesting. Oops. You do want it to be extremely dry so that it can kind of soak up the flavors from the spicy mayo. So there's the tuna. I'm gonna do some of the crab. Now this is the flake style crab, but I'm gonna take it a step further and kind of break it up even more. Just kind of shred it with my fingers. You can also just leave it whole. I'm just trying to get about the same amount of crab as I currently have tuna in this bowl. Tuna here, crab here. I'm gonna add some spicy mayo to each. That beeping is the rice cooker. It is done. Now this part's completely optional, but I do like to kind of take this regular rice and make it a little bit more like sushi rice. And I do this by adding about a 1/4 cup of mirin to it. And then using a rice paddle, just kind of working in that mirin. You kind of do this fold motion and then cutting motion with the rice paddle to distribute the mirin evenly and to help cool down the rice. So now we're going to go down with a layer of rice. You're probably going to have some leftover rice because this makes about 4 cups of rice. And one of them I'm going to top with the spicy crab. And the other with the spicy tuna. Now I'm really big on presentation, so I'm gonna give it a drizzle of extra sriracha for that little color variation there. And I'm also gonna do the same with mayonnaise for the same reason. Little bit of color variation. So orange, white, red, it just makes it look a little fancier. I'm not gonna make a rolled sushi. There's a couple different reasons. The first is that seaweed sheets are more expensive than seaweed snacks. I like to buy these. Not only are these a little bit cheaper, the seaweed sheets were $4.99 at Food Lion, these were $3.99, and oftentimes you can get these on sale for like $2 or less. Stay fresher. You might not use the entire pack of nori in a single setting and then you have to store it and it could potentially go stale or soft due to humidity and other factors. So these are easier to keep, they're cheaper, you can just use them as you go. And then rather than doing a rolled sushi, which also requires like a sushi mat, you can just make little sushi tacos. Let me demonstrate. When you take your sushi out of the container, there is kind of a shiny side and a more textured or matte side. That's the side that we're gonna assemble our little bite. So go ahead and grab a spoonful of your either tuna, crab, rice mixture with the sauce and plop that right down onto your little seaweed sheet. You can add a little bit more if you want. And then you have a bite-sized little piece of sushi without any technical skills, knowledge, or a sushi rolling mat. Now let's try them. I'm gonna start with the canned tuna version first. That is not bad at all. Slightly tastes like tuna, but when you've got like everything else kind of incorporated in there, again, use albacore if you want like a more mild tuna flavor. I was expecting that to taste more tuna-y, and it really doesn't. It does have a slight tuna flavor. Like, I'm not gonna claim that it's not there, but it's very subdued. Very subdued. I'm gonna do the crab one next, which I think is just beautiful because the crab really brings out the colors in the spicy mayo. Version is really great, but it does taste a little bit more sweet because imitation crab is a little on the sweeter side. So they both have their merits. I would eat either of these again. No problem, no questions asked. I think this is great when you're in the mood for sushi. Either version will satisfy your craving. And again, use what you have. You know, if you have canned tuna in the pantry, you can whip up a batch of tuna sushi. If you have things that you can add to it that you like in sushi, like avocado, like cucumber, you can really mimic those flavors on a really tight budget. Because we just use regular rice, we just use canned tuna. The most expensive thing you're gonna buy is gonna be the sriracha and potentially the mayonnaise. And of course the mirin if you decide to get some of this. Again, this is totally optional. It's just to help make that regular rice have that sort of sticky texture and a little bit more of that sushi flavor. You could potentially get all of the ingredients to make this for less than like $12 or so. Assuming that the mayonnaise and the srirachas are around $4 to $5. And that would last you for several meals. So it's a $12 investment to be able to eat sushi many times. You know, not including the nori sheets, but again, these come in a 4-pack for $4. They're really affordable. You can't even get gas station sushi as cheap as you could make a bowl like this at home. Well, I had a lot of fun trying these kinds of poor man's recipes. I think it was all fantastic ideas. I can definitely see how some of these came to be. I tried some new things that I've never tried before and I really enjoyed the process. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you're having a fantastic day and I will see you again soon.